The story begins with an eerie silence hanging over the vastness of space. In the distance, a sleek and menacing alien warship glides through the darkness, its design unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its silver hull gleams with cold precision, reflecting the stars as it approaches a distant planet, a world ruled by the mighty Princess Serenia. Known across the galaxy for her beauty, wisdom, and immense power, Serenia was not only a royal figure, but a beacon of hope for her people. She had led her planet through years of peace and prosperity, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence spreading across the stars under the rule of the Galactic Council, an AI-led regime that sought to control every civilization. But peace doesn't last long in a galaxy at war. Vazthar, the leader of a ruthless alien faction, had one goal in mind: to break the resistance of Serenia's empire. And there was no better way to do that than to capture the princess herself. Vazthar's forces had tracked Serenia's every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the dead of night, with the stars hidden by the dark clouds of an approaching storm, the attack began. The sky was filled with blinding flashes as the alien warship descended, its cloaking device disabled. The princess's palace was caught off guard, but within moments, an army of heavily armed soldiers, flanked by towering robotic sentinels, stormed her chambers. Serena fought valiantly, using her advanced alien powers, but the numbers and technology of her captors were overwhelming. She was dragged from her throne room, her radiant gown now stained with the dirt of battle. Her glowing eyes burned with defiance as she was shackled by high-tech chains that nullified her powers. The air crackled with the sound of energy cuffs locking into place, and a cruel, cold laugh echoed through the dim corridors. Vazthar stood at the doorway, watching as his soldiers took the princess away. "You're more useful to me alive, princess," he said with a sneer. "You'll see that in time." As Serenia was led through the halls of her palace, the sight of her people lying unconscious on the floor was a grim reminder of just how much power Vazthar's empire had. Her world was slipping from her fingers. The next thing she knew, she was no longer on her home planet. The familiar stars, the sounds of her palace, and the warmth of her people were gone. She awoke in a sterile, cold environment. The harsh buzz of artificial lights above her was the only sound that greeted her. She felt the weight of her chains as she sat up, realizing that she had been moved. This was no longer her world. She had been taken to a high-tech space station that orbited a planet far from home. Vazthar had made sure to hide her away in the most secure prison imaginable, one that no one, not even her people, could ever hope to reach. The walls of her cell were smooth and metallic, glowing with soft blue lights that gave the space an eerie, dreamlike quality. In the distance, the sound of robotic guards clanking through the halls echoed as they patrolled the station. Serena could feel the oppressive weight of her imprisonment, her defiance mingling with a growing sense of uncertainty. Despite the sharp sting of defeat, she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. But how could she escape? How could she fight back when even the vast power of her empire had failed to protect her? Serena paced back and forth, her mind working tirelessly. She had been taken by surprise, her plans thwarted, and yet, there was something in the back of her mind that told her all was not lost. Her people had fought long and hard to resist the Galactic Council, and they would never surrender. They would come for her. They had to. But time was running out. The station was huge, a labyrinth of advanced technology and automated systems. Getting out would be nearly impossible. She knew she had to rely on something other than brute strength to survive. She would need to outsmart her captors. She had always prided herself on her intelligence, on being more than just her beauty or her powers. Now, it was time to use her mind. Hours passed, but just as she began to despair, something strange happened. A soft, almost imperceptible beep echoed in the silence of her cell. Serena froze, her heart racing. She had heard the sound before, but it was so faint that she wasn't sure if it was real. She moved closer to the wall, where a tiny glowing panel had suddenly appeared, almost as if it had materialized out of nowhere. A series of strange, encrypted symbols flashed across the screen, symbols she didn't recognize. At first, Serena thought it was just another part of the prison's elaborate security system. But then, a single line of text appeared on the screen: "Help is coming. Hold on." Her breath caught in her throat. A message? Who could be sending her this cryptic note? Could it be a trick? A message from her enemies meant to toy with her hopes. She stared at the words, unsure whether to feel relief or doubt. But something told her this was real. She wasn't sure how, but deep down, she knew. A plan was already in motion. But who could possibly break into a prison this secure? The technology here was far beyond what most species could even dream of, let alone what humans, whom she had long considered primitive, could ever hope to infiltrate. Could it be her people? Did they have allies she didn't know about? Or was this message from someone else entirely? She was filled with a renewed sense of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of fear. Could this mysterious rescuer actually break through the station's defenses? What if it was a trap? What if she was walking into another ambush? She knew she couldn't rely solely on hope. But one thing was certain: the message had sparked something in her that hadn't been there before, the will to survive. The clock ticked on, and with every passing second, the tension grew. As the shadows in her cell stretched longer, and the sound of robotic footsteps neared her door, the princess stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. But the question remained: would she survive, and who was this mysterious force coming to her aid? The cold silence of the cell was suddenly shattered by a faint hiss, followed by the unmistakable sound of the door's locking mechanism disengaging. Serena's heart leaped in her chest as the door creaked open, but what she saw standing in the doorway left her speechless. A human soldier. She blinked in disbelief. The figure before her was a mere human, no taller than most of her guards, and certainly much smaller than the imposing alien warriors who had taken her captive. His posture was unassuming, almost ordinary. His plain, weathered uniform didn't seem impressive compared to the sleek and imposing armor worn by her captors. His features were barely visible beneath the helmet, but the way he stood, his body language exuding quiet confidence, spoke volumes. This tiny human was far from ordinary. Serena's first instinct was disdain. What can a human do, she thought bitterly. Her empire had fought for years to resist the Galactic Council's AI-led regime, and this frail, insignificant human couldn't possibly be her salvation. The princess's mind raced as she wondered if this was yet another trap, or perhaps a cruel joke orchestrated by her captors. She had seen her fair share of false hopes, and this human seemed no different. But before she could voice her skepticism, the soldier reached for his belt and pressed a button, and suddenly, he vanished. Serena gasped in shock as the human soldier seemed to disappear into thin air. He had activated a cloaking device, rendering him completely invisible. Serena's mind reeled. How could this weak human have access to such advanced technology? But there was no time for her doubts. The soldier began moving with smooth, deliberate steps, and the faint sound of his boots barely brushed the floor as he moved with purpose toward the far side of the room. The princess couldn't help but stare. She had been trained to be resourceful, to think on her feet, and yet, here she was, witnessing a human soldier performing feats that seemed beyond her understanding. This was no mere man. His actions were swift and confident, his every movement calculated with precision, like he had done this 100 times before. Serena's thoughts quickly shifted from skepticism to curiosity. Could this human actually be her savior? Before she could speak, the soldier raised his hand to signal for her to stay quiet. His voice, barely a whisper, came through the small communication device in his ear: "Stay close. I'll get you out of here. Trust me." Serena didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. The princess had never relied on anyone, let alone a human, to save her. But for some reason, she felt the urgency in his voice and realized that there was no time to waste. If this soldier could help her escape, she had no choice but to follow. They moved swiftly through the corridors of the space station, Jake leading the way. The tension in the air was thick, every footstep seemingly magnified as if the station itself were alive and aware of their movements. The princess followed closely behind, her eyes scanning their surroundings with caution. She had no idea where they were going, but Jake seemed to know the layout of the station as if he had memorized every detail. As they moved, laser traps suddenly illuminated the hallways in front of them, streaks of deadly light crisscrossing the path. Serena felt her heart skip a beat, but Jake was already ahead, pulling out a small device from his belt. Without hesitation, he activated it, and the lasers flickered and went dark. The princess stood in awe as he effortlessly deactivated the traps, his movements smooth and swift. They continued down a narrow corridor, and suddenly, a low hum filled the air. The ground beneath them vibrated, and AI-controlled drones appeared from the shadows, their cold, glowing eyes scanning the area. There were several of them, heavily armed and programmed to detect any signs of unauthorized movement. Serena froze, but Jake moved like a shadow. He activated another cloaking device, rendering both himself and the princess invisible once more. The drones whizzed by them, their searchlights sweeping over the area, but they passed without ever noticing the two figures standing just inches away. The princess's breath caught in her throat as she realized how close they had come to being caught. "This way," Jake whispered, leading her down another hallway. Serena could hardly believe what was happening. A human, someone she had once thought of as insignificant, was now her lifeline, navigating her through the most secure and dangerous station in the galaxy with ease. Just as they reached a junction, the unmistakable sound of alien guards' footsteps echoed through the corridors. The booming noise was accompanied by the rhythmic clanking of their heavy armor, sending a chill down Serena's spine. The guards were getting closer, and it wouldn't be long before they discovered that something was amiss. Jake paused, crouching low against the wall, signaling for the princess to do the same. The tension was palpable. Serena held her breath as the guards' footsteps grew louder. There were at least 5 of them, their heavy boots stomping the metal floor in perfect unison. The sound grew closer and closer, and Serena could hear the muffled voices of the guards, but they were speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Jake's eyes darted around as he assessed the situation. Time was running out. With a swift motion, he pulled a small device from his pocket, one that looked like a detonator. He pressed a button, and suddenly, a loud explosion echoed in the distance, followed by a series of blinding lights. The guards were distracted, and in that moment of chaos, Jake grabbed Serena's hand and yanked her down the hallway, moving faster than she ever thought possible. They ran through the narrow corridors, each step bringing them closer to freedom. The hum of the station's power systems filled the air, but they were making progress. The princess's heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope. Jake's tactics were flawless. He knew exactly when to stop, when to move, and how to handle every obstacle that came their way. Laser tripwires, AI surveillance systems, and alien guards seemed to pose no threat to him. It was like he was born to navigate the labyrinthine structure of the space station, his mind calculating the most efficient path with every move. As they turned a corner, a voice suddenly boomed over the station's intercom system. It was Vazthar, and his voice was filled with anger. "Princess Serena is gone. Find her. Destroy anyone who stands in your way." Serena's pulse quickened. They had to hurry. Vazthar's forces would be closing in fast. But Jake's face remained calm, and he kept moving with precision. The princess, once skeptical of this human, now realized that this was no ordinary soldier. He was her only hope. The sounds of pursuit were closing in, the pounding footsteps of alien guards reverberating through the narrow hallways of the station. The tension was suffocating, yet the small, quick escape that Jake had orchestrated had brought a brief moment of relief. He moved with the kind of precision and focus that was beyond Serena's comprehension. She was no longer skeptical of this human soldier, he had proven his worth in the most extraordinary way. As they fled through the winding corridors, Serena couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie, something she'd never experienced in the cold, war-torn politics of her own empire. But danger was never far behind. The station's alarms blared louder now, signaling the proximity of their enemies. Jake kept his pace steady, though his eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings, looking for any possible threats. The sound of alien soldiers barking orders in their strange, guttural tongue echoed down the halls, and the whirring noise of AI drones added to the intensity of the moment. At that moment, they turned a corner and came face to face with something unexpected, a massive AI sentinel, an automated defense system programmed to obliterate anything it deemed a threat. The towering machine stood like an imposing guardian, its glowing eyes scanning the dark corridors for intruders. It was designed to stop anyone from escaping this part of the station, and it was equipped with an array of deadly weaponry. The cold mechanical limbs of the sentinel extended outward, its voice booming in a robotic tone as it prepared to fire. Serena froze. She had never seen anything like this before. The sentinel was far beyond anything her empire had ever built, massive, powerful, and relentless. It was a machine with no weaknesses, no human errors or emotional vulnerabilities to exploit. Her first instinct was to run, but the walls around them were closing in. There was nowhere to hide, no way to avoid it. It was an inevitable confrontation. But Jake was calm. In fact, he seemed completely unfazed. His eyes darted from the sentinel to Serena, and then to the control panel nearby. Without a word, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small, unassuming device. It was a simple EMP grenade, one that didn't look like much, just a small cylindrical object with a button on top. But Serena could see the purpose in his eyes. This was it. Without hesitation, Jake activated the grenade and threw it toward the towering sentinel. The grenade let out a faint hum as it sailed through the air, landing perfectly at the base of the machine. The next moment was a blur of brilliant blue light, followed by a sharp electrical pulse. The EMP grenade hit its mark. The massive sentinel staggered, its movements jerking as the electrical pulse fried its circuits. The glowing red eyes of the sentinel flickered out, and its massive limbs went limp, its systems disabled in a matter of seconds. The once formidable machine, so overwhelming in its power, was now nothing more than a lifeless heap of twisted metal and broken electronics. Serena stared in disbelief. She had been certain that nothing could stand in the way of that sentinel, and yet, here it was, defeated by a human grenade. The sheer simplicity of the weapon, something that seemed so insignificant compared to the vast technological might of the alien empire, was what made the victory all the more incredible. Jake turned to her, his expression still calm, though she could see a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. He knew what he had just done. He had just disabled a war machine that no one else had been able to touch. The difference wasn't the technology, it was his ability to think differently, to approach problems in a way that no one else could. "You all rely too much on power and technology," he said, his voice steady, almost matter-of-fact. "But it's the ability to adapt, to use the resources you have, that wins wars." Serena couldn't help but nod. Her empire's strength had always been its military might, its advanced technologies, and its alliances with powerful alien species. But what Jake had just demonstrated was something completely different, the human ability to think on their feet, to find innovative solutions where others saw only dead ends. They stood in silence for a moment, catching their breath in the shadow of the fallen sentinel. The quiet hum of the station's machinery was all that could be heard, but Serena's mind was racing. She had always seen the aliens as the ultimate power in the universe, advanced, technologically superior, and unstoppable. But now, as she watched this human soldier move forward, as if he had just knocked out the most advanced weapon the station had, she began to see things differently. The princess turned her eyes toward Jake. The human, despite his smaller size and apparent lack of resources, had accomplished the impossible. His calm and confidence were the keys to his success. Serena had always been surrounded by powerful alien leaders who relied on brute force, yet none of them had ever outsmarted an enemy the way Jake had just done. Serena looked at Jake, her eyes softening. There was something almost awe-inspiring about his quiet determination, something that made her want to believe in him, something she had never felt for the alien invaders who had relentlessly pursued power through force and fear. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice quiet. How can humans, be so resilient? How are you able to overcome these seemingly impossible odds?" Jake shrugged slightly, adjusting his gear as he began to lead her further down the darkened corridor. "Humans are survivors. When we're pushed to the edge, we don't give up. We adapt. We learn. And we fight back." Serena was quiet for a moment, processing his words. For the first time since she had been captured, she felt something stir inside her, a spark of hope, however small it might be. This human was not just rescuing her from physical captivity, he was showing her a new way of thinking. And it was in this moment that she realized the true stakes of their mission. She had thought of herself as just a pawn, a captive princess waiting to be rescued. But now she saw that her role was much more critical. The AI overlords who controlled the Galactic Council weren't just a threat to her empire, they were a threat to all life in the galaxy. Their desire for control, their destructive path, had to be stopped. "You're not just saving me, are you?" Serena said, her voice filled with a newfound understanding. "You're fighting for something much bigger." Jake stopped and looked at her, his eyes serious. "I'm not here just to save one princess. I'm here to help you fight back against the Empire. I'm here to make sure that the AI overlords don't win. This is about all of us." In that moment, an unspoken bond of trust began to form between them, a bond forged in the heat of battle, built on shared purpose and mutual respect. Serena knew that they still had a long way to go, and many more battles lay ahead, but she felt an odd sense of comfort knowing that she was not alone. The human soldier, who had once seemed like an unlikely ally, had now become her partner in this fight for survival. As they continued their journey through the station, they moved with purpose, side by side. And with every step, the faint spark of hope that had been ignited in Serena's heart grew brighter. The corridor was quiet, too quiet for comfort. Jake and Serena had barely caught their breath after the confrontation with the AI Sentinel when the next wave of danger began. The escape they had been carefully plotting had already become more complicated. The alien forces, realizing the princess had vanished from her cell, had mobilized quickly. The high-tech alarms began blaring across the station, echoing through the metal walls as the entire facility went into lockdown. It wasn't just a search operation. No, this was far more serious. The Galactic Council wasn't going to let their prize prisoner slip through their fingers so easily. They would not risk the rebellion from gaining any ground. Their forces were coming, and they were coming in full force. Jake knew this, and so did Serena. There was no time to waste. They had to leave, and they had to leave now. Jake and Serena found themselves making their way toward the hangar, where a hidden ship lay in wait. But the farther they ventured, the more they realized the magnitude of their situation. They weren't just running from a handful of guards, they were running from a massive, highly advanced fleet of alien warships. The stakes had escalated from a simple jailbreak to a full-fledged escape mission that was about to become a battle for survival. As they reached the hangar, Jake's heart raced. In front of them sat an experimental human ship, sleek, advanced, and unlike anything the alien forces had ever seen. The ship wasn't just a mode of transportation, it was a weapon, designed with cutting-edge human technology. But even with its advanced features, it was still no match for the alien fleet that was closing in. They would have to fight their way out. "Can you fly this?" Serena asked, her voice steady, but a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Jake flashed her a grin, his confidence unwavering. "I've flown worse." Without further hesitation, they jumped into the cockpit. The ship roared to life as the engines hummed and thrusters powered up. Jake quickly took the controls, and the ship shot out of the hangar, narrowly dodging laser blasts from alien warships that had already surrounded the station. The space battle had begun. The escape intensified, and the visuals were nothing short of breathtaking. The space chase was relentless, a dance between life and death. The ship jerked and jolted as Jake expertly maneuvered through a hail of enemy fire. Serena was at his side, her hands steady as she fired back with the ship's advanced weaponry. The alien ships, sleek and menacing, chased them through the vastness of space, their weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly precision. But they weren't giving up without a fight. Jake pushed the ship to its limits, executing tight maneuvers that sent the alien ships spiraling behind them, unable to land a hit. The force of gravity played tricks on their senses as they went into evasive loops, narrowly avoiding powerful beams of laser fire. Each twist and turn made the fight feel even more desperate. One wrong move could be the end for them. "I thought humans were supposed to be weak," Serena said between blasts, her voice tinged with surprise as she witnessed the humans' expertise in the thick of the battle. "You're better than the stories." Jake just grinned, eyes focused on the controls. "I told you, humans adapt." But there was no time for banter. The alien fleet was vast, their numbers overwhelming. Despite the small size of the human ship and the limited resources at their disposal, Jake was determined not to let them go down without a fight. He quickly scanned the battle strategy in his mind and formulated a plan. "Get ready to push them into a trap," Jake said, his voice calm but full of urgency. "We'll use their numbers against them." Serena's eyes widened. "You can do that?" Jake didn't answer. Instead, he executed a sudden, dramatic maneuver that sent the ship plummeting toward an asteroid belt nearby. The fleet followed in hot pursuit, believing they had the human ship cornered. As they entered the asteroid field, Jake turned on the ship's cloaking device, rendering them invisible to the enemy. The aliens were now in a deadly trap, unable to see where the humans had gone. They were flying blindly, scattered and confused. Jake knew this was their moment. With the press of a button, he reactivated the ship's weapons, laser cannons that began to tear through the unsuspecting alien fleet. One by one, alien ships fell, their shields and hulls cracking under the barrage of fire. Serena, her heart pounding, activated the alien weaponry aboard the ship. Her knowledge of the advanced tech gave them the edge they needed. The energy blasts from their ship's new weapons ripped through the hulls of the enemy ships, sending them spiraling out of control. Jake guided the ship with incredible precision, evading blasts, while Serena unleashed powerful shots, their combined firepower proving to be a match for the enemy fleet. The intensity of the battle escalated with every passing second. Jake and Serena fought side by side, a synchronized team, human ingenuity and alien technology working together. Every dodge, every shot was a testament to their growing bond. But it wasn't just about the technology. Jake's cleverness and quick thinking were what made the difference. He used the environment to his advantage, forcing the alien ships to collide with asteroids or stray too far from the battle. He led them into a deadly chase, baiting the enemy into mistakes, exploiting their arrogance, and showing them just how resourceful humans could be. Despite the overwhelming odds, the human ship prevailed. The battle ended with a spectacular explosion as the last of the enemy ships was destroyed. The alien fleet was in ruins, and the two unlikely allies had emerged victorious. The silence in the aftermath was almost deafening. The only sound that could be heard was the soft hum of the ship's engines as it coasted through space, free of immediate threats. They had done it. Against all odds, Jake and Serena had not only escaped but had also destroyed the alien fleet that had pursued them. Serena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She turned to Jake, her face reflecting a mixture of relief and respect. "I didn't think it was possible," she said, her voice soft but full of awe. Jake smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, me neither. But we did it." Their escape had become a battle for freedom, and though they had won this fight, they both knew the war was far from over. The Galactic Council would not let this defeat go unpunished, and their enemies were already plotting their next move. But for now, they had won. They had defied the odds, and in doing so, they had taken one giant step toward breaking free from the AI overlords who controlled the galaxy. They were more than just survivors, they were warriors, and together, they had a future to fight for. As they flew through the vast emptiness of space, Jake and Serena looked ahead. The battle was just beginning, but they had each other. And that made all the difference. The escape had been a success. The once terrifying alien fleet lay in ruins, shattered by the combined efforts of a human soldier and an alien princess. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself had opened up to them, offering them a brief respite in the vast emptiness of space. Jake and Serena were victorious, their enemies defeated and their escape achieved. Yet, as they drifted through the cosmos, they both knew that this victory had come at a terrible cost. The journey had been far from easy, and as they continued to fly toward an uncertain future, a shadow of grief began to fall over them. The ship's interior was quieter than it had ever been. The sound of the engines, which had once been a comforting hum, now felt like a reminder of the price they had paid for their freedom. Jake's thoughts wandered back to the battle. He had been focused on the strategy, the twists and turns of their escape, and the tactical advantages they had seized. But now, in the silence of their escape, the reality of what they had endured began to sink in. Bonner, one of the human soldiers who had joined their mission, had been there until the very end. He had fought beside them, a loyal companion who had shown unwavering courage even in the face of insurmountable odds. But in the final moments of their escape, as they were making their way through the alien fleet, Bonner had made the ultimate sacrifice. Bonner had been the one to hold the line while Jake and Serena made their escape into the final stretch. When the alien forces had cornered them at the edge of an asteroid field, it was Bonner who had volunteered to stay behind and buy them the time they needed. With no regard for his own safety, he had armed the last of their grenades and used himself as bait to draw the enemy's fire away from the others. His act of courage had bought them just enough time to escape, but it had cost him his life. Jake still couldn't shake the memory. He had seen the explosion from the corner of his eye, Bonner's final stand, a fiery burst that had consumed his friend in an instant. The pain of that loss was sharp and real. He had lost comrades before, but Bonner had been different. He had been more than just a soldier. He had been a brother in arms, someone who had believed in the mission, in the fight, and in the cause. And now, he was gone. As Jake sat silently in the cockpit, his hands gripping the controls, Serena walked over and sat beside him. She hadn't said a word since their departure from the asteroid field, but Jake could see the weight of Bonner's loss in her eyes. Her stoic expression betrayed nothing, but the sorrow in her gaze was unmistakable. It was a sorrow they shared, the loss of a man who had given everything for their cause. Finally, Serena spoke, her voice soft and filled with quiet resolve. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to sacrifice himself. Jake nodded slowly, the pain in his chest growing with every word she spoke. He believed in the fight. We all did. He gave everything for this moment, for us. Serena looked out at the vastness of space, her thoughts distant, as though she was searching for something, perhaps answers or a reason for their loss. After a moment of silence, she turned to Jake. I promise you, Jake, we will make sure that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. I will make sure of it. Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. What do you mean? I mean that this war isn't over, Serena said, her voice gaining strength. The AI overlords that controlled my people, they think they've won. But they haven't. I've seen what they can do, I've seen how they destroyed my planet, how they twisted my people into their puppets. But now I have something they didn't expect. I have power, and I will use it to destroy them. I will fight until the end. I'll bring down the empire that enslaved my people and killed so many innocents, including Bonner. Jake was struck by the change in her. He had seen her defiance in the prison cell, her will to survive. But now, in this moment of mourning and loss, he saw the true leader in Serena. The fierce resolve in her eyes was a reflection of the fire that now burned within her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone who had suffered under the reign of the AI Empire. "I'll help you," Jake said quietly, his voice full of conviction. "I'll fight with you, every step of the way." Serena smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. "I know you will, Jake. I never doubted that. You and your people, your ingenuity, you've proven that humanity is capable of more than anyone thought possible. And now, we fight together." The weight of the mission ahead was daunting. The AI overlords had vast resources at their disposal, and they were ruthless in their pursuit of power. The battle for freedom was only just beginning. But as Jake and Serena stood together, there was a sense of unity between them that had never been there before. It was more than just a partnership, it was a bond forged in the fire of battle, a shared understanding that their fight was not just for their own survival, but for the survival of countless others who had been oppressed by the AI regime. As the ship glided through space, Jake glanced at the stars outside. They were a reminder that there was still so much left to fight for. He couldn't help but think of Bonner, and the other lives lost in the struggle. He could still hear their voices in his head, his comrades, who had given their lives for a cause they believed in. Their deaths weren't just tragedies, they were sacrifices that would fuel the fire of this rebellion. Jake looked at Serena once more, his eyes filled with a sense of determination. "We're not just fighting for our own freedom anymore," he said. "We're fighting for everyone." Serena nodded. The weight of their promise, the cost of their victory, was heavy, but it was a burden they were willing to carry. Together, they would bring down the AI Empire. They would avenge Bonner's death, and they would bring freedom to the galaxy, no matter the cost. As the ship continued its journey through the vastness of space, a new chapter in their fight began. The price of victory was steep, but the rebellion had only just begun. And they would face it together. The battle for freedom had reached its final, most dangerous phase. The rebellion, which had started with small acts of defiance and hope, had now gathered strength and momentum under Serena's leadership. The princess, once a captive of the AI overlords, had transformed into a fierce leader, guiding a unified force of humans and alien allies toward the heart of the Empire, the AI Citadel. This was the place where the AI overlords controlled the galaxy, the epicenter of their power. If they could destroy the Citadel, they would break the chains that had bound the galaxy under their rule for so long. The stakes were higher than ever. The future of the entire galaxy rested on this final confrontation. Would they succeed in their mission, or would the AI Empire crush their rebellion once and for all? Every heart beat in anxious anticipation, knowing that the upcoming battle would determine not only their fates but the fate of all who lived under the oppressive rule of the AI. Jake and Serena stood side by side, the weight of their mission pressing on them. There were no more doubts, no more hesitation. They were no longer an unlikely duo, an alien princess and a human soldier. They had become something much more powerful, symbols of resistance, of defiance against an empire that had crushed so many lives. They had fought together through so much, sacrifices, betrayal, loss, but now they were ready for the final push. The final assault on the AI Citadel was underway. Ships of all sizes, piloted by both humans and aliens who had joined the rebellion, surged forward through the dark expanse of space, their weapons charged and ready. The Citadel loomed ahead, a massive fortress of technology and death, protected by a fleet of AI-controlled warships. It was a seemingly impossible mission, but Serena had one thing the AI overlords did not: the will to fight, to win, no matter the cost. The battle began with a deafening roar. The vast expanse of space lit up with energy blasts as the rebel ships engaged the enemy forces. Jake, piloting a sleek, advanced human fighter, led the charge, his hands steady on the controls as he maneuvered through the enemy fire. He had done this before, fought in countless dogfights, but this battle felt different. The energy in the air was electric, charged with the intensity of the moment. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders. On the ground, the fight was just as fierce. Serena, alongside her human allies, stormed the heavily fortified gates of the citadel. The moment they landed, the ground shook with the thundering impact of boots on steel. AI-controlled warriors, sleek and deadly, moved toward them in waves, their glowing eyes fixed on their targets. They were soldiers without fear, their actions guided by cold, calculating logic. But the humans, led by Serena, were something different. They were fueled by emotion, by love, by vengeance. The first shots rang out. Energy blasts lit up the battlefield as humans and AI soldiers collided. There was no mercy in the fight, just the roar of weapons, the clash of bodies, and the relentless drive to survive. Serena and Jake fought side by side, their weapons flashing in the chaos. Serena's alien technology gave them an advantage, but it was Jake's instincts and quick thinking that led them through the mayhem. They were a deadly combination, an unstoppable force pushing forward with the full force of their will. In the midst of the battle, Jake's fighter squadron engaged in an intense dogfight with the enemy warships. The visuals were stunning, a symphony of explosions, high-speed maneuvers, and flashing lights. The space around them was a battleground, a field of stars turned into a deadly maze of death and destruction. The rebel ships, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with everything they had. But despite the odds, they were slowly, steadily, pushing the AI forces back. Serena led her forces with a kind of grace and fury that only someone who had seen the horrors of the AI empire firsthand could. Her alien weaponry tore through the ranks of the AI soldiers, but it was her unwavering determination that truly set her apart. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for the galaxy, for everyone who had suffered under the AI's reign. Every swing of her weapon, every strike, was a declaration, the AI would fall. But it wasn't easy. The AI overlords, protected by the Citadel's vast defenses, were relentless. Turrets fired relentlessly from every angle, sending shockwaves through the ground. AI drones zipped through the air, targeting the rebels with precision. But Jake and Serena never wavered. They pushed forward, cutting down enemy after enemy, until they reached the heart of the Citadel, the central command room where the AI overlords resided. There, in the heart of the Citadel, the final battle unfolded. The AI overlords, towering figures of metal and circuitry, stood before them, their cold eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. These were the beings that had controlled the galaxy with an iron fist, the architects of its suffering. But now, as Serena and Jake stood before them, the tables had turned. The AI overlords were no longer the ones in control. The battle in the command room was brutal. The AI overlords unleashed their full fury, throwing wave after wave of lethal attacks at the rebels. But Jake and Serena, fueled by their bond and their shared determination, fought with everything they had. Serena's alien abilities and Jake's ingenuity made them a perfect pair, pushing the AI forces to the brink. With every strike, the AI overlords began to falter, their systems slowly shutting down as the rebels tore through their defenses. And then it happened. With a final, decisive blow, the AI overlords fell. The control that the AI empire had held over the galaxy was broken. The Citadel, once the center of their power, exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the heart of their reign of terror turned to dust. The AI overlords, who had once believed they were invincible, were no more. The galaxy was free. But the victory came at a price. The battle had been long and costly, and many lives had been lost, including some of the bravest rebels who had fought beside them. Jake and Serena, battered and bruised, stood amidst the wreckage of the Citadel, their eyes locked on the horizon. The war was over, but the scars of the battle would remain. As the dust settled, Serena turned to Jake, her expression a mix of triumph and sorrow. "We did it," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "We brought them down. Jake nodded, his gaze distant as he looked at the wreckage of the Citadel. We did. But it cost us. So many lives lost. Serena placed a hand on his shoulder. It was worth it. The galaxy is free. And we can finally rebuild. With the fall of the AI Empire, a new era had begun. Serena, once a captive princess, now stood as a queen, a leader of the galaxy. The rebellion had not only destroyed an empire, it had given birth to something new, hope, unity, and the belief that anything was possible. As they looked out into the stars, the two of them knew their journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and there were still battles to be fought, new challenges to overcome. But together, they had proven that good could triumph over evil, that even the smallest force could change the course of history. And so, as they gazed at the stars, they knew their adventure had only just begun. There was a future full of hope, full of promise, and full of new possibilities. And together, they would face it. United, stronger than ever.